Hello everybody. My name is Tom Roebuck and I'm a specialist at UEA in early modern scholarly and intellectual cultures. That means I use Latin in my research quite a bit. I'm sorry that we can't all be together this week studying Latin, but I do hope that you're going to get a lot out of this session working at home. Our enormous thanks go to Brett, Cleo and Anna for their immense work and imagination in bringing this course online. I'm doing a session of Latin in the Wild, which means that I'll be introducing you to a real passage of Latin that I've encountered during the course of my research. It's the opening of one of the big important books to me, William Camden's Britannia, his antiquarian masterpiece, which offered chorographic descriptions of the peoples and places of Britain and Ireland. Camden began the work in the 1570s, published the first edition in 1586, and then went on to publish several more editions until his final Latin Britannia emerged in 1607. The passage we are studying is the opening of that final edition of Camden's Latin Britannia. I hope you find it a rich passage. It's Camden's preface to the reader, and it's the place in which he discusses the origins and ambitions of his great work. To my mind, it evokes a very famous ancient discussion of antiquities and antiquarianism. Cicero's praise of Varro, the great Roman antiquarian, in his Academica, a work which Cicero dedicated to Varro. These are the achievements of Varro, he writes. For we were wandering in our own city like foreign tourists when your books brought us back to our home, as it were, so that now at last we can see who and where we are. That's W. Martin Bloomer's translation, by the way. Camden's passage is also rich in metaphors that humanist scholars used to think about what makes their own approaches to the past distinctive. I hope this is also a useful exercise because prefaces are often parts of Latin books that scholars find particularly interesting. They're often sites of methodological reflection or biographical comment on the origins of a book. It's a really good exercise to take a chunk of a Latin book's preface and just have a go at reading it, getting used to the vocabulary, getting used to the language. I'm envisaging that you'll have a go at this passage first of all at home on your own. I recommend that you look up more or less every word in the dictionary to really understand what it's doing. And there are a couple of online dictionaries that I particularly recommend. They have opposite purposes. One is Perseus's Latin word study tool. This makes the colossal amount of information contained in Lewis and Short available to you. It's really useful for clarifying particular idiomatic expressions or subtle meanings of words, of which Latin has so many nuances. Don't be afraid to read right down and explore the full range of meanings on offer. The other resource I find useful is Wiktionary. It has the opposite function, as it offers you a tight and brief list of meanings of particular words. If you scroll down, you can sometimes find expressions in its Latin phrase book. You can see that here. Taken together, these two resources are really useful. Pause the video at this point. Have a go at the extract I've shared with you, and then you can restart the video and I will take you through the passage myself. Well, I hope you enjoyed going through that passage. I'm now going to take you through it sentence by sentence so you can see what sense I've made of it. So let's have a look at the first sentence. I find it quite helpful with this to go straight to the verb, which is the last word actually of the sentence. Haud quaquam disputed, it is by no means shameful. And then we go to praefari, which is deponent, to speak as a preface, to speak some words as a preface. De nuo nunc, now at last, and then it's the person to whom we're speaking, benevolo lectori, to the kind reader. in hac postrema editione, in this, we could say, last edition or next edition. It's an interesting question of whether Camden conceived this to be the last edition, but I think that you could kind of make an argument for either. So it is by no means shameful to speak as a preface now at last to the kindly reader in this last edition of the book, and then we go to eadem et iisdem verbis pauculis adjunctis, in the same way, eadem et iisdem verbis, in the same words, and in the same words, pauculis adjunctis, with a few joined. And then we go actually to the very beginning, and that's really the last thing. We go to this quae, and what does the quae refer to? Quae are the words. So it's neuter plural of qui. Verbum is neuter. So in the same words with a few adjoined, which, the words which I had spoken as a preface, praefatus eram. That's pluperfect deponent, praefatus eram, in the first edition of this book, 20 years ago, in prima editione huius libri of this book, genitive, 20 years ago. So that's the first sentence put together. Then we come to the second sentence. We have it's slightly more straightforward in its order, because we start with the subject, which is this man Abrahamus Ortelius, who's, is explained, is the eximius restaurator, the great restorer, veteris geographiae, of ancient geography. So that's, we've got the genitive, and Abraham Ortelius is I think here the great restorer of ancient geography in two senses. He's the man who, I suppose, is being presented as one of the real revivers of geography, and indeed cartography as an area of interest in Renaissance Europe. And he's also the restorer of ancient geography, because his particular personal interest was in the geography of the ancient world, and how we might reconstruct some of those ancient places. And as Camden explains, he was the person who encouraged him in this whole undertaking of the Britannia. So he's saying Abraham Ortelius, the famous restorer of ancient geography. And then we should go to the verb agit, which is from ago, perfect from ago. In this sense, I mean, this word has so many meanings, but in this sense, it's something like he led, or he encouraged, or he urged, and then you go to mecum. Agit in this, with that meaning, takes the ablative, and that's what you have here. So he encouraged me, mecum, in the ablative, pluribus, probably something like on many occasions, and he encouraged me to illustrarem, so he encouraged me, effectively, the grammar, and it's kind of not very idiomatic in English, but the grammar is effectively that I would illuminate our Britain. Illustrarem is imperfect subjunctive, first person, but we would probably just say something like he encouraged me on many occasions to illuminate to illuminate our Britain. Its very antiquity, or something like that. Antiquam illam. And then the next clause sort of expands on what Camden's just said. This is all still the stuff that Ortelius was encouraging Camden to do. So he says, that is hoc est, that is that ut restituerem, that I would restore. Again, imperfect subjunctive, restituerem, Britanniae antiquitatem, antiquity to Britain. Britannia is in the dative here. Antiquity to Britain. And then et suae antiquitati Britanniam, and Britain to its own antiquity. That I would restore antiquity to Britain and Britain to its own antiquity. This is a very, very famous passage from the Britannia, and I think this is one of the bits which has something of that Varro passage about it that I mentioned when I was introducing this passage. And then ut aderem, that I would add, or that I would give, I suppose, novitatem vetustis, newness to antiquities, lucem obscuris, light to obscure things, and fidem dubiis, faith to things that are doubtful. These are all in the dative plural, vetustis, obscuris, dubiis. These are all things that he's giving something to, and there's this fierce sense of paradox here. All of them are opposites. He's giving something to its opposite here. And then he concludes this whole sequence of what Ortelius had encouraged him to do in this clause with the ut postliminio revocarem, that I would call back to its home veritatem in rebus nostris. So veritatem, truth, in rebus nostris. Rebus, res, is always a very difficult word to translate. It has so many meanings, and you just get a feel for it. Here it is clearly meaning rebus nostris, clearly meaning our histories, and truth into our histories, our affairs, our the kind of doings that went on in Britain. So truth to our histories, which quam. So this is the veritatem, the truth, which the securitas scriptorum. Securitas is a really interesting word. It can more or less mean pretty much opposite things. It can have positive or negative senses. Here it's clearly being used in a very negative sense. Securitas must mean something like carelessness. The carelessness of writers. Or which, so either or, which either the carelessness of writers, or the credulity of the people, with a kind of negative sense of the vulgar, vulgi credulitas, and then proscripserant is pluperfect. From proscribo, so pluperfect, they had rendered suspect. So it's the subject of proscripserant is securitas and credulitas, and they had rendered this truth veritatem suspect. And then there's just one last bit of this clause to fit together, quod fieri posset. And in some ways it's better to think of this as going with the postliminio revocarem, that I would call back to home, veritatem, the truth, and then quod fieri posset, as far as it was possible to be done. So quod, as far as, posset, is possum, but in the subjunctive, as far as it was able, and then fieri, the passive infinitive of facio, to be done. Okay, great. Moving on to this quite a bit shorter sentence now, after that very long sentence. We start with opus sane arduum et plusquam difficile, so the work, sane arduum, certainly arduous, and more than difficult. and this kind of almost, I mean, I've put a colon after this in my translations. This is almost sort of kind of gives a feel for this as kind of sudden sort of sense unit here, and it's good to preserve that, I think. But then in quote in which, and then we kind of have the structure here of ut nemo fere sentit, sic nemo plane credit, and I've kept the semicolon after sentit, which is in the original printing, but I think in a way it is clearer for us to think of it as a comma, as almost no one knows, so plainly no one believes. And what do they not know or believe? They don't know how much work could possibly go into doing something like the Britannia, and that's what this quantopere sit sudandum is all about. Quantopere, how greatly. Sit sudandum. Sudandum is gerund from pseudo, so gerund's a verbal noun. Pseudo is actually I sweat, and sudandum sweating. And sudandum sort of, yeah, it's got that kind of how greatly there would be sweating, and so it's sit imperfect. It's sit subjunctive, because we don't know how great it would be. So there's something kind of hypothetical about it here. So the quantopere sit sudandum, I suppose what I'm saying is you have to kind of give it a bit of a circumlocution to make sense of it. So it's something like in which. So the opus in which, as almost no one knows how great the labour is, so plainly no one believes it. That's probably one of the trickier bits in the whole passage, I think. So well done if you kind of just about kind of saw a way around that. And then nisi, unless or except, qui ipse. So this is kind of starting this subordinate clause with qui, except, I think is better, except qui ipse, a man who himself, and there isn't a word for a man, but you just have to kind of understand that from the qui ipse, a man who himself fecit aliquando periculum, has made aliquando ever an attempt, except a man who himself has ever made an attempt at doing something like the Britannia. That's the only kind of person who can understand the extent of the labour involved here. So here I think it's useful just to start with the tamen, however, nevertheless, and then we go straight into a quantum tantum construction. So these are quite common, and it's good to see plenty of examples of them. Quantum, as much as, and then tantum, so. So quantum, as much as, re difficultas, the difficulty of the matter, me deteruit, deterred me, and then we actually, it's now useful to think of the a proposito from the beginning, from the plan. I think the idea is it's something that's been proposed by Ortelius, so that's why it's in that proposito word. So as much as the difficulty of doing something like the Britannia deterred me from the proposal, from the plan, so tantum, the clarissima gloria patria, the famous renown of the fatherland, excitavit, encouraged me, ad id ipsum aggrediendum. So aggrediendum is another gerund, this time from aggredior. So encouraged me to this very undertaking itself. And then here we've got a slightly longer sentence again, and quite a tricky one, I think. This might have presented a few problems, I'd imagine, but well done if you just breezed through it. So I think it's helpful to kind of divide it up, really. The first part, from itadum simul to de esse nolui, and I think it's if we get our heads around that bit first, that's quite helpful. So itadum simul, thus while at the same time. So this sort of sets up the idea we're going to have two contrary feelings that Camden's experiencing. Thus, while at the same time, metui, I was afraid, sobire, and that's from sobeo, which is one of those words that has loads and loads of meanings. Sobire is the present infinitive, and in this case it's going with honours, and I think it must mean to lift a burden. So, thus while at the same time I was afraid to lift the burden, i.e. to take on the Britannia project. Deessa nolui, I was unwilling. Deessa, to here. I mean, there's several kinds of meanings, but I think something like to neglect. Again in the infinitive, and it takes the dative. So gloriae must be in the dative, to neglect the glory, but I think renown might be a better translation. The renown of the fatherland. Quantum in me sit. We have an expression to have something in you, and I think that's basically what this means. Quantum, as much as in me sit, it would be in me. So in sit being in the subjunctive. So I think what it's saying is as far as I could, as far as I had it in me. To do something about the glory, the renown of the fatherland. So that's the first part of this quite knotty sentence. And then we pick up with res diversissimas. Now, with this passage is great for showing all the different kinds of things that Latin can do with this word res. But he's saying that the most diverse, in this case, feelings, the most divergent, perhaps, or contrary feelings, timiditatem et audaciam, timidity and audacity, fear and audacity, which so these contrary feelings, which nunquam never putavi, I have thought, posse, to be able, in the infinitive, cadere, again infinitive, difficult word to translate, but in this case almost means just something like to be present, in eundem hominem, in the same man. So Camden's saying he's never thought that these absolutely opposite feelings could be present in the same man. Nescio quo pacto, I do not know by what agreement. And then animad verti, I observed, conjoined in me. So he's saying that he'd never seen such opposite feelings, and he didn't believe that they could be found in the same man. But in this case, he observed them in himself. And then this sentence begins with this rather glorious, long compound word. I'm not sure it's very classical Latin, but verum enim vero, something like truly therefore. It's a very emphatic way of saying therefore. Truly therefore. And then aggressus, deponent. So it's having set out. From aggredior, which is a word we've already seen in this passage, but deponent, so it doesn't quite have the same kind of passive sense that you might expect. So it's a bit more active. Having set out, deo auspice, with under the sight of God, comite industria, with industry, labour as my companion, rem, having set out on the matter. With all omni animo, with all spirit, thought, labour, and with assiduous meditation, thought, contemplation, all of those kind of senses. I incubui, I devoted. Perfect. I devoted myself, understood, totus, wholly. The totus in the nominative because it's going with Camden himself. He's devoted himself wholly. In eandem successivis horis, into the same, in eandem, into the same matter, the same project, the writing of the Britannia, with his spare hours. Successivis horis. Camden was a very well-known and well-respected school teacher at Westminster School, and taught, among others, the poet and playwright Ben Jonson. So he really did write the Britannia in his spare hours, as he's saying here. So it's quite a short sentence here as we sort of transition into Camden kind of explaining a bit more about his whole approach to the writing of Britain's antiquities. And he's saying, inquisivi, perfect, I have inquired, timide, adverb, with trepidation, with a certain amount of caution, into etymon Britanniae, into the etymological origins of the word Britain, and this is something that Camden's particularly interested in and engaged with. Et primos incolas, and the first inhabitants Britanniae, of Britain. Nor nec affirmavi, again perfect, have I affirmed quicquam anything, asseverante, emphatically, again adverb, in re dubia, in a doubtful matter. I didn't choose this piece because there is because of these so many uses of the word raise, but actually it is wonderful for a class just on showing all the different kind of things you can do with this very important word. And here it is again, nor in a doubtful matter. He's saying that he's been quite cautious, especially when it comes to ancient British history. So here, to make sense of this clause, we need to go straight to the end. The last word, novi, I have known, perfect. And then here we'll see that we have a construction which those of you who did my class in November will remember. We found many examples of these constructions in that passage. To my mind, they're really important. They feel somehow very central to the whole nature of the Latin language, and that's the indirect statement or accusative and infinitive construction. So it's I have known that, and then we get to we need to find the accusatives, we find the infinitives. So that the origins of peoples, esse obscuras, are obscure, emo incertas. Emo is kind of sometimes spelled with two M's. Indeed means indeed or absolutely or something like that. Indeed, uncertain. So I have known that the origins of peoples are obscure, indeed uncertain. Vetostate nimia. This is in the ablative, but it's an ablative kind of causation because of their too great antiquity. So he knows that the origins of peoples, because of their too great antiquity, are obscure, indeed uncertain. And then just to round this off, there's this rather lovely sort of metaphor for explaining this idea, and he says, "Velod, as if things which cernuntur passive, cernuntur vix, are scarce, cernuntur from cerno, are scarcely seen, magno in intervallo loci, with a great interval of place." things which are scarcely seen from far away. So he's saying that these obscure antiquities, these obscure origins of people are buried so far in the past that they're like things seen far in the distance that we can scarcely make out. And this is a really beautiful passage. And then the last clause, perinde, just as the decursus, the courses, magnorum fluminum of the great rivers noti sunt are known, and then just as the reticula, the tributaries, the confluentes, the confluences, the ostia, the mouths, all of these are known, nota, noti. But he says the fountains, the very fountains, plerunque, commonly, frequently, themselves, latent, lateo, lie hidden, ignoti, unknown. So he's sort of saying that commonly, thinking with the analogy with the rivers, the course of the river, the body of the river, the journey of the river, we know that, but frequently we don't know the fountains, the fontes, where the rivers come from. And obviously this is a whole metaphor for humanist scholarship and learning, and the desire to return ad fontes, to the fountains, to the origins, to the places where the rivers spring from. Well, I hope that's been useful, and you've made sense of the passage, and that you've enjoyed exploring some of its knotty ins and outs, and that you've learnt a little bit as well about Camden and about the reading of some of these kinds of prefaces and some of the kind of things that they might be able to teach us. The last thing I've also included on the handout is Ben Jonson's poem for his schoolmaster William Camden, and I've always thought that it's extraordinarily close to some of the language of this passage in particular, almost like some kind of response to the opening of the Britannia. So perhaps that might also provide food for thought and something for you to enjoy, but I doubt you'll be lacking that in such a rich week of Latin that Brett, Cleo and Anna are leading you through. So do enjoy all of that and enjoy all your Latin studies in the future. Thank you so much for listening now. Thank you.